Hello, my name is Tom Carhill. It's the 10th of December 2013. I appreciate it happened a while ago, but I have recently had a look back at something which I took quite a bit of interest in when it happened and afterwards, and partook in various discussion with people where they couldn't quite work out what was going on and they're very confused by it. And the thing I'm speaking about is the attempt by Roger Hayes to arrest a judge in Birkenhead, apparently to arrest a judge. I don't actually ever believe that's the aim of it. Now, for a start off, Roger Hayes is a monkey. He's got no intelligence. He couldn't have organised anything. Right now, quickly, we're looking in the background. Roger Hayes' website is the British Constitution Group, which often has stories that are linked to the UK column. If you call the British Constitution Group, it definitely used to go through to the UK column. They're both basically linked. Right now, I believe that this was so that then when Brian or whoever's pulling Brian's strings, and I don't know if anyone is, I know Mike the editor is a bit of a sinister character, so maybe he is pulling strings. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. But both Mike and Brian Gerrish, I believe to be communist change agents, and I believe them to have a communist agenda which is pro-EU. Now, you might think this is completely off the wall, and how on earth could I think that? And I'll explain why, right? So, you've got a stage of detachment between them and the British Constitution Group. I don't think Brian Gerrish actually went up to Birkenhead. But what was the ultimate aim of that? Now, Roger Hayes would say, publicity, publicity, I get to be a victim, blah, blah, blah. That's what he would have gone for because he loves attention, right? And he's very insecure. So we'll just call like Roger Hayes the communist subversive change agent's monkey. That's what he is. He's Brian Gerrish's monkey. So you've got the pompous idiot monkey going up there and being the person who's kind of like the cherry on the cake of a load of naive people who've gone up to go and do something without checking out what they're doing first. Now, the second thing that was generated, and again, as I said, I believe this would be Brian or someone who's pulling Brian's strings, possibly Mike. What it was, they were getting more people to go up there because I know that they've got people to go to Michael Dougherty's court cases. They're the ones who've told people to go, and they deliberately misinform them about what the court cases are about. By the way, I know this because I've got first-hand information. So well-meaning people go along to a court case thinking it's to do with something which it's not to do with. Now, they go along to these court cases not knowing what they're about. They never know what they're about, or some of them do and some of them don't, and there's always a lot of confusion. Now, I've witnessed that with my own eyes and ears, right? Right, so the second thing is, you've got to remember, Roger Hayes had a council tax dispute. That was over, right? He was going to some kind of hearing about his insolvency, because basically, look, if you don't pay your council tax, there's two options. You either get fined, or you can get like a kind of penal sentence, like a month in prison or something like that. Something like that. You cannot get both. It's one or the other. Now, linking to his bankruptcy, if it went down the fine option, they would have fined him. He said he's not going to pay. They would have issued for bankruptcy. They'd have made him bankrupt. Now, I've covered this in other videos, but the point is that Roger Hayes was on the official, was it not the official receivers? Is it official receivers? He was listed as an undischarged bankrupt. So all this bollocks about not being bankrupt, he's just that. It is bollocks. Now, he might have been undischarged, whatever, but he didn't somehow swerve it all by saying he didn't give any consent. That aside, that created a lot of confusion because those people thought it was something to do with council tax. That was over. That was been and done, and it was in the past. So they all went up there, and then there was this other matter of it being an unlawful administrative hearing. Right now, when you get undischarged to bankrupt, that's not a trial. Sorry, when they sort of like put through the things, that's not a trial. You've been made bankrupt by default of the fact that you've not paid the debt and you've not contested at an earlier point. So it's not like they've just run roughshod over the law and the council has something to do with that. That's got nothing to do with the council. The council does try and do things like that, but in his case, that was not what was happening. So those people all went up, 350 of them, got a big mob of people to go up there, all well-meaning, no violence really involved, but they did eventually try and grab hold of the judges, people standing on tables, I believe people who were actually in on the sort of deeper level of it. knowing they would never get in trouble. And one guy got arrested and he got sent to prison called Rusty. That's his nickname, isn't it? But I don't know his real name. But I know that then Brian and Roger didn't have anything to do with him when he was in prison. So he was in prison for a year and he was very angry about it. But I would put it to you that obviously he was a scapegoat, and I've made it very clear in the past that one of Brian's initiatives is getting people into trouble. But that's part of the distraction. He wants to get the little person in trouble, but I believe there's a lot that's to divert from the major thing he's trying to do. Now, think of it in a completely different light. He's got a level of disassociation with Roger Hayes, or plausible disassociation. You could say it wasn't me. Now, after that event, Brian didn't go, look, Roger shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. He's worked completely outside the system. We don't want to be doing that. He's actually effectively, I mean, it is assault if you touch somebody. If they were going to try and arrest someone, that is actually kidnap. All of these things, you're not allowed to do, right? And what he could have possibly been doing in that attempt to what he did there, because I know that he's fucked up other people's court cases and he's gone there and he's, said things and done things which are completely off the wall and wrong. And then he's then said, oh, look, the court case is wrong, whereas he's just caused the problem and he's created the entire problem himself, or a large part of it himself. And if it's in a family case, for instance, you've got gag orders. So then he tells the people they're not allowed to tell anyone or they go to prison. So the whole thing with it is Ryan Gerrish does do these very, very highly suspect things. Now, if you look at it from the point of view that he is a communist change agent and he's a subversive, like that, if you type into Google KGB defector, and there's this guy explaining how the communists will go and affiliate themselves with things just to get some kind of problem going or some movement going, and then they'll use that movement to go and channel the same people into another good cause and another good cause. I believe what Ryan Gerrish was doing on that occasion, without being the actual pivotal man, because I don't think he was up there. And anyway, he wasn't marching around like, I'm the boss. He let Monkey Roger do that. He was creating a situation where, even though it's never been thought of in the past, he's creating a situation where it'd be quite easy to say, well, I think we need armed security in courts. Now, there are loads of courts in England, right? Now, if you've got people going to court cases and the judges or the magistrates, some of them might be crooked, some of them might not be. The whole point is the primary, if you look at the very first court that was ever convened, the whole point of it is to have a sort of formal process whereby things get decided. Right now, ironically, in Roger's case, that wasn't what was happening when all those people went up. It was just a situation to sort of put it in the public domain that he is, he is bankrupt and he's been pushed over the edge by the insolvents, by the council asking for some money, which he's refused to pay, or he hasn't been able to pay. So ironically, it wouldn't have even really been around the formal, regular process, which would normally happen in what a court building is required to do. But the whole point of getting back to it is the whole point of a court is you've got to have a formal concept of the administration of justice, which is why in the army they have court martials, even though it's debatable whether you get much of a chance. They still have it on the record. He got found guilty of this. This person was meant to be defending him. This person was meant to be. We have to get the war going. We have to do it in one day. Blah blah blah. But there's still a record. Somebody has to say this is why we made that decision. Now, if you're in a communist system, you dispense with all that. You don't have a judge and a jury. You just literally say, right, that's it, 10 years or bullet in the back of the head, whatever. The whole point is they still have courts. The reason they have courts is because even though it's highly imperfect, it's better to have that than it is to not even have any form of, because you've got a separation of power. The executioner wasn't probably in the court building with the judge's wig on. You see, so you still have more legitimacy if you have a trial, even if it's not a trial, even if it's just a kind of bench memorandum and they're just reading out what they've decided beforehand. Somebody has to put their neck on the line and say, that's what I'm saying, and this is why I'm saying it. And if that turns to be completely unfounded and completely corrupt, at least that person has to go out on a limb and say that. And that's not as easy as what people might think it is. Right now, with what Ryan's managed to whip up, right? In England, as I said, there's loads of courts, right? And you don't get armed police in any of the courts that I know of. Maybe they get them in for certain high-profile cases like in the Old Bailey. Probably they do. But I've been in the High Court in London, and there's no court security. I've been into I've been into a magistrate's court once because I wanted to use a toilet. I just walked past the security scanner. You can get in. It's very easy to get in. If what Brian could well have been doing, because a lot of people say he was trying to foment violent protests and get, a big clampdown from the state. Now, I'm not saying that wasn't true. I actually think he was also trying to do that. What I think he's a very, very, very clever user of Saul Alinsky tactics, for instance, and other communist subversion tactics, which are all quite well known, but they're so complicated in the long-range element of the psychological operation that most people can't follow them. Now, I've covered in other videos, if something's got a long-range aspect, it's very difficult to spot because they'll be doing lots of apparently good work for a long time, and it will seem impossible that they can be doing any wrong. But then when it turns out that they eventually start channeling it into wrong years later, you know that they haven't been doing it for personal snidey reasons. They've been obviously funded to do it because no person in their right mind would try and do something that takes 10 years just to put in place and might not actually go anywhere. It proves state involvement or large private sector, private interest involvement. So you can tell it's a psychological operation because of that. Now, what Brian could have quite easily managed to put in place is a situation where he got a load of patsies, effectively, to go up to Birkenhead and put in a situation where no longer would you even be allowed to have, I don't mean witnesses talking, but I mean like witnesses viewing court cases. In England, you can go into a courtroom, you can just sit there, you don't have to announce, you can just go in there and sit and watch all the court cases if you wanted. In almost all instances, they very rarely say, look, no one's allowed in. You're allowed to do that. Not only would that be very, very easy to just say, look, we don't have many people coming in anyway. It's too dangerous. We had this mob of 350 people come in once. We need to have security guards monitoring them. Like the way they have in football matches, the police have to get paid by the teams to monitor, police the games. You could have a situation where you wouldn't even be allowed to have people watching your case because they'd say, look, it's only over 10 grand or it's only over like a speeding fine. We don't even want anyone in there because we're going to have to pay people to come down. Do you really want, the whole court process could be made doubly expensive in literally the blink of an eye like that. It could happen. And that's the kind of level of the cleverness. Right, so I'll go back. First of all, you've got disassociation. It uses Monkey Roger to do it. Then there's a load of other patsies, none of whom really knew what they were doing in Birkenhead. And even afterwards, even a year afterwards, still were very confused about things like why did Rusty go to jail? Why didn't Ryan Gerrish speak to him? Why didn't Roger Hayes speak to him? They're going on about all this other stuff about I thought if you council tax, you didn't pay it, you'd either get a fine or go to prison. And of course, he got a fine, which is why the bankruptcy proceedings were there, and he was saying he didn't consent. And yet, at the same time, it appeared to be already a done deal. So not only was it not to do with council tax, it wasn't to do with bankruptcy being a trial anymore, like I've said. It was an administrative thing. They're just saying, right, that's it, no problem. You're going to be made discharged in however many years. And he said, no, I'm not. And they just left him and let him be undischarged, whatever, or not discharged. I don't even know what happened in the end. The point is, people fixated quite rightly on that stuff. But the thing with that is there's only so many things you can think about. So when they're fixating on all these levels of confusion, which have all been geniusly orchestrated or apparently textbook orchestrated from a very clever plan or a playbook, which is incredibly complex, like, somebody's very good at chess and can think loads of moves ahead. Impossible for anyone who doesn't know how to do it to see what they're actually doing. Literally, it's impossible. They have orchestrated a situation where they've got a load of patsies, they've got plausible deniability, they've got Monkey Hayes, they've got Brian having the same, having the same contact base and having the same phone numbers on the websites, and they all talk to each other every day. And Roger Hayes worked in the office. They're two separate websites, two apparent separate organisations. He could have easily just said he had nothing to do with it. He's very clever, and what he's done is he's lined Monkey Hayes up, lined all these other people up who could have got, potentially done for causing a massive disturbance in a court building. Could have all got in lots of trouble. It's quite amazing that only one person got done, but then maybe that's all part of the plan, because of course this could have all been changed depending on how the public perceived the thing. So he's got plausible deniability. He's then managed to get all these people to go up there. They don't even know what they're going up for, and as I've said, in cases with Michael Dougherty, where he's been going to issue private criminal prosecutions. I've gone to see where he's gone to lay information on magistrates, and there's people in there telling them, no, he's putting a commercial lien on and it's free man on land. These people have not got a clue what they're talking about, yeah? They have not got a clue what they're talking about, and they're all going along, and these people, if they were to be questioned by the police and arrested, right, they wouldn't even have a clue what they were talking about. So the idea that they would get away with something or manage to scrape through or fucking hell, heaven help us, use free man on the land tactics to get out of anything. It's absolutely, it's you know what I mean, it's absolutely unthinkable. There's no way they could do it. Because they don't even know why they're there. Because they'd be saying, right, you were there for a court case about this. No, you weren't. It wasn't a court case. And you see, so basically, I believe that Brian Gerrish has been pursuing numerous means of putting in communistic measures into England. And I think he's been doing very well at it. And in all the confusion that he's created around it, people think he's trying to get people in trouble and trying to foment some kind of violence to get people in trouble and infiltrate things and report back. Undoubtedly, yes, he's taking lots of people's information and he's tricking them and he's wasting masses of their time. That on its own, and the backing commercial liens and the free man commercial lien process when he knows it doesn't exist, that alone means he's definitely a COINTELPRO and he's definitely causing problems. The problem is, when you focus on that and you think, oh, he's just a bit of a shit, you're not thinking what he's doing on an even deeper level. So what he's doing, it's a bit like it's like he's punching with one hand, but then he's not just punching with the underhand, he's actually hitting them on the way back as well. He's hitting twice with one punch. And it's incredible. It's like Silat, you know, the way you jab and then as you fall past them, you don't hit them with the other hand. You use that cover of the fact that you grab them. So you get two hits with one hit. You use the momentum twice. You don't use one bit of momentum, waste some momentum and go in with the other one. And whilst they're being distracted by being punched, they've obviously been hurt by that. And therefore, when the next thing moves in, they're being distracted. So you're actually hurting them with the distraction. The problem is, if you look at it in this way, the distraction, which people think that's the whole point of it, proves he's a baddie. It does prove he's a baddie. The commercial lien thing does prove he's a baddie. As simple as that, he supported it. It had no validity. He knew it didn't. He knew it for a fact that it didn't, and he kept supporting it. That was like an assault on the movement he was pretending to be protecting. But the point is, that was also the distraction so that he could bring in the big move, which was potentially getting all the courts in England to be kind of highly restricted. And if he, heaven forbid, had managed to get that to happen in the High Court, just think what would have happened. Now think, all of the court protection things are heard in the High Court, whether it be a district registry, you know, in a big city, or in London. He had lots of support, some of those. All it would have taken, if the Holly Gray thing hadn't been exposed as a completely dubious premise, him and Belinda Mackenzie, because he probably was using her, and give her a credit, she's also a communist change agent, quite clearly, or at least she's MI5. They could have managed to single-handedly get loads of people in trouble, loads of people in big trouble. They could have managed to get armed security guards into the courts, and they could have, at the same time, managed to make out that anybody who has any interest in anything to do with abuses by solicitors who work in child protection cases or social services or any children going missing in the system, anything like that, would be seen as an act of terrorism, because that act of terrorism, like other acts of terrorism that haven't actually happened, has meant that they have to put all the massive influx of security into, say, for instance, airports, which there was a stage when that never used to exist, but then it's got brought in and people go, oh, I'm glad, I feel safer now. Fucking terrorists blowing everything up. You say, who blew anything up? They're like, oh no, they're always doing it. I've seen it on the news. That's the thing with what Brian Gerrish was doing. He would have managed to make, saying, oh, my children have been taken off me and I don't think there was a good reason. Eventually, those people would be able to get sent to prison for, terrorism. Because people who say their children have been taken off them for no good reason are by default terrorists. if you see the depth and the cleverness of what he's doing, it's so incredibly bad that you get distracted by the initial little things he was doing. And then when you put that down to the fact that in England there doesn't appear to be any obvious other Operation Mockingbird type people who have been caught recently, well, a lot, I mean, obviously the BBC, that's the whole point of it, but that's very obvious. But, you know, like for people who are a little bit more intelligent and to not even bother watching the BBC or never to ever take anything it says seriously, who is filling that void of the Operation Mockingbird COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, or the massive ramp up of MI5, like our good friend and traitor Jamie Bartlett of Demos says? Who are the people infiltrating these kind of conspiracy theorist type organisations? Who are these people? Who are they? Because I'm definitely not one of them, and I've not been paid by the state. Possibly very good at it. Maybe it'd be a good line of work to get into. But the point is, who are they? Think how dangerous the things that Brian Gerrish was doing. I understand that if it's put to you from a position where he's told you about one thing, then another thing, then another thing, then all of a sudden they say, well, the Constitution's been subverted, the judge is acting illegally, we really need to start arresting them. That does sound, piece by piece, once he's gained your trust, to be reasonable. But to somebody on the street who hasn't listened to hours and hours of him talking for years, gaining trust, getting a big network and having a lot of people doting on him, thinking he's doing an excellent job, they're just going to think this is mental. These people, they've all gathered together, 350 of them, in England, right? Al-Qaeda obviously doesn't exist. But the whole point is, they've never managed to claim that there's 350 of them all getting together. Think of it like that. It's completely mental. What he's done is so incredibly clever. And I don't know if it's him or it's someone pulling his strings like Mike, the editor in the UK column. But it's very, very clever what he's done. And now I've seen what he's doing. I knew there was more to it, and there's probably even more, and I hope some of you can help me think of it. I don't know, as I said, it's all come together. It hasn't just come together with, by me thinking about it all myself. Other people have said things that triggered the other things off. And I also believe that at the time when I was finding out about it, I was incapable, due to the distractions which he cleverly put in place, I was incapable of working it out. And I always knew at one stage in the future, if I looked away from it, there'd be more to it. But I didn't know that it would be like a whole new dimension. I just thought it'd be like I'd find out who was funding him or why or what the bigger plan was. I didn't realise, it's almost like if you saw a fight outside a pub, you've seen someone getting punched. Then 6 years later, you realise, fucking hell, he didn't just punch one person. He punched 6 people. I didn't even see him doing it. And then you find out, he also robbed the cash register. I can't believe it. I've looked at the same CCTV footage. I think he just gives someone a little shove. And then I realise he's assaulted 7 people altogether. And he stole the cash register. My God, how clever. I've literally looked at the same information. And I've come up with a completely different view. It doesn't contradict my last view. But it just goes to show that by using distraction, you could so cleverly deceive people that they start going around looking at their shoes to see, their shoes are a bit dirty. I'm not going to wear those shoes, I don't like them. And they don't even look in front of them, and they don't realise where these magic shoes are leading them off to. It's very, very clever, and as I said, it's actually staggering, and I some of it I've only just sort of worked out in the last few days, because I've been speaking to somebody about it, and and I've been doing a bit of thinking, and some of it is only just bolted together in the last hour. So, I'll be very glad to hear your thoughts. Remember, I'm not one to put people down for just, making ad hominem attacks and using lots of bad language and being abusive about me. That's fine. I wouldn't want to discourage that healthy side of debate that a lot of people seem to enjoy so much. But please, if you're going to make criticisms, try and actually criticize one thing that I've said. And if you think that it proves something or another, please explain why. Because otherwise, you leave yourself open to looking foolish. And the last thing I'd like is for somebody who's very enthusiastic to listen through a video to just use unsubstantiated vulgarity of the kind that this guy called, I forget his name, he was another monkey, he was talking to Roger Hayes and he recorded a phone call that he'd made. Poor monkey Roger Hayes, Brian Gerrish's monkey, the patsy who's been set up to be a patsy, and anyone who he's had conversations with who then gone and put them on the internet despite saying that they're definitely not recorded, yeah? Roger Hayes, even though he's a scumbag, and he did go on the Edge Media TV, and he did say that commercial liens can get your children back if you think that the state are trying to take them off you illegally without any good reason. He did say that. He knows full well they couldn't have been, even though that's a diabolical act, let's say a wretched act, like somebody who's a horrible sex offender who does horrible things, but you still feel sorry for them because they're in prison forever. And thank God I don't have any predilections in that direction. I would never do anything like that. You've got kind of like a duel. You sort of think, my God, I'd hate to be like that, but I'm glad, they're horrible. Obviously, that's an appropriate type of stance to have against Roger Hayes. He is still a victim. He's definitely a victim, and he was being lined up for a lot more trouble. And that bizarre stint in prison that he did, which didn't make any sense whatsoever, because I said, going back, if you don't pay your council tax, you either go to prison or you pay a fine. If you pay a fine, the fine would be levied, and then if you went bankrupt for not paying it, you wouldn't have both going. So he wouldn't have gone bankrupt off the back of not paying his council tax. He could not have had that happen to go to prison. I don't see how that could have happened. Roger Hayes is a complete fucking monkey, and that's why he was used. So even though he's somebody who should be basically kicked when you're like a dog, or not a dog, like a horrible diseased monkey when you walk past him in the street, you've got to realise that he is also a victim. And all of his drinking, that he allegedly doesn't do, but everyone says he does, that's probably because on a deep level, he realises he's being used as a hate figure. He realises he's being used as a horrible, rabid monkey for everybody to just hate and say, poor old Brian, he has to put up with Roger, and Roger went off and did all these bad things. He has been set up for that. It's absolute genius or absolute pedant communist subversive doctrine used to the absolute letter. It's textbook. It's absolutely incredible, yet extremely evil and extremely bad news. And if there's anybody who's capable of getting, large proportions of the Ukrainian public all just murdered, all these peasants and stuff, and you think that couldn't happen here, if it can happen here, it's going to be very, very clever, devastatingly clever, extremely fascinating tactics like those that have, I believe now, I can see being used by Brian Gerrish. They're the kind of things that are going to be it. And you might say that's old news, arresting the judge is old news. I have only been capable of taking it in 3 or 4 years later after I first discovered that happening. That's how long it took me to see it. So if that's how long it takes you to catch up with something, whatever it is, 3 or 4 years, whatever, that's a long time. And, if I take all that time working it out, and some people, they're never ever going to work it out. So I'd like to leave you with that. But as I said, if you're going to make comments, please feel free to be as rude as possible, whatever. But make sure you link whatever it is to whatever you're trying to say, because otherwise it just looks ridiculous. And you've just got all these ridiculous comments which just don't mean anything. Just calling me names. Anyway, so, okay, see you later. Bye-bye.